Hey, what's going on? What's up? What's happening, everybody? This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. And today's topic is going to be about hoodoo. So I just want to shout out to all the new subscribers that's been subscribing to my channel. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing my channel, liking my channel, and even commenting. So again, I haven't been on here as much. I haven't been doing videos a lot like I used to. So with that being the case, yeah, it's a lot of setbacks. So it's a lot of things I wanted to discuss, but I wasn't unable to. And and it's probably gonna be like that more often where you're not gonna see me doing videos as much because I have a lot of stuff that I have to take care of on my end. So yeah, once I get that taken care of, then I can go back to doing things consistently. But now, just for now, I'm just doing video every so often. Okay, so that's just how it is. But anyways, I want to go ahead and talk about this topic, hoodoo, because October is Hoodoo Heritage Month. All right, so hoodoo is very popular in the South, especially. It's very big, especially if you're in Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, or even Florida, Louisiana. Yeah, you'll catch a lot of practice of hoodoo, and even in Texas. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go over historical facts about this particular ritual practices, and also I have some books that I want to share with you guys, and I'll make sure that I'll post up the title of the book in the link description box. So I'll make sure I type them up for y'all so y'all can look up more information and then type up some articles and stuff, put that in the description as well. But let me go ahead and get started. All right. So what is hoodoo? And how did hoodoo come into practice? All right, so I'm going to post up one of the articles that I have looked up online. And this comes from National Park Service, right? It's come from National Park Service. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll post this information up for y'all. So right here, according to this website, right? Now it talks about hoodoo in St. Louis, all right? So in some part of the Midwest, they do practice hoodoo, okay? But let's go ahead and look at it. So hoodoo, not to be confused with voodoo, it's a spiritual religious tradition created by enslaved African Americans in the United States and inspired by Central and West African religious practice. The practice include herbal healing, veneration of African ancestors, counterclockwise circle dancing, rain shout, water immersion, sacred music, spiritual possession, divination, and using charms for spiritual protection against physical harm and conjure. Many of these Central and West African religious practices were brought to North America during the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans were often forced to become Christians upon arrival in North America. The synchronization of African practices with the Christian religion created hoodoo among enslaved African Americans. Slave codes did not allow large gatherings of free or enslaved blacks, and it was a crime for African Americans to practice tradition from Africa. As a result, some hoodoo practices were hidden in African American churches. Uh-oh. Woo! Wait, woo! Hold on. Let me highlight that for y'all. Whoa! What did it say? Hoodoo practices were hidden in African American churches. Ooh. But let's continue. Creating a unique brand of Christianity that fused African tradition that was called Afro-Christianity or African American Christianity. The Hoodoo religion during slavery included religious practice from various African cultural groups, including the Odinani religion of the Igbo people, the Yoruba and the Voodoo religions of the Fon and Iwe people, and Bantu Congo tradition in Central Africa. All these African religious traditions blended and fused with Christianity on slave plantation, creating a unique spiritual tradition practiced by enslaved African Americans and their descendants. After the Civil War, many of these African religious practices survived in Hoodoo and became a spiritual practice that continue in African American communities today. So, woo, wait a minute. Didn't I say that you can find African customs practiced in these black churches? That's Hoodoo. You can find Hoodoo practice in the black churches. See, when people think of Hoodoo, right, they think of, let's just say, a Hoodoo woman. If they think of a Hoodoo lady, they might think of a lady walking around with her face painted up, wearing a scarf, and having some type of crystal ball and tarot reading cards. Now, some do that. Some do wear their face painted. Some of them wear the scarf and stuff. Some do that. But actually, the Hoodoo lady could be that elder in the church that sits in the benches. The one that give you the peppermint candy. Or that elder that sits at the very front. That could be the Hoodoo lady. That Hoodoo lady could be your great grandmama or your grandma. So all the church folks out there, real talk, before y'all even throw stones at people who practice African spirituality, whether if they in Lukimi or Santeria, Voodoo or Peyo, Mayobe, or whatever spiritual system they in, remember your African ancestors, right? Your African American ancestors took on those African customs, took on the African religion, and blended into the church. Now, in my next video, okay, I'm going to be talking about Dr. What's his name? Dr. Wyatt T. Walker. I'm going to talk about Dr. Wyatt T. Walker in my next video, because he goes very well into this. Now, he was a pastor, okay? And he was a civil rights activist that marched with Dr. King and all right? He was based out of Massachusetts, but he had a church in Virginia, okay? And in his congregation, he spoke about the music and the origin of what we call gospel music. So again, I will do a video on him next time I come back on here, okay? But yeah, it's important to know that there's a lot of Hoodoo practice in the church. And see, like I said before, and I mentioned it, our ancestors were so clever at disguising things, okay? And there was a reason why they disguised. That's why there was a reason why they didn't openly practice it, because at that time it was forbidden for slaves to practice African customs. They were forbidden to do so, so they had to keep it as a secret. They were not allowed to be out in the open. So they did it amongst themselves, or they blended in with their spiritual practice. That's what they did. And to this day, we still carry on those customs. I can give you some examples before I continue with the article. My grandmother, and I post this up on Facebook, my grandmother was from the country, which is the rural town, right? She was from Crawfordville, Georgia. Okay, that's further south, South Georgia, all right? So a lot of the folks that come from the country, right, they was into a lot of the Hoodoo practice. We call it superstitious. Excuse me, superstitious. That's what we call it, superstitious. Because, you know, today a lot of us don't believe in that stuff. We don't believe that to be evidence. But that's how she came up. So here's a few examples. The first example was combing the hair, right? So if you got your hair combed and there was hair on it, you had to take the hair off the comb and burn it on the stove. You either burn it on the stove or you even flush the hair in the toilet. You was not allowed to put it in a trash can, because what the old folks used to believe, that if you put the hair in the trash can, that the birds will make a nest out of your hair and you'll start losing your mind. Right? Another one that my grandmother did, she used to put salt around her door. Because what that indicates, that if you put the salt around the door, it keeps the bad spirits away. It keeps bad people away from you. Another one was splitting the pole. If you split the pole, that was bad luck. Don't put your purse on the floor. Because, of course, you know, it was considered to be a bad thing. And you were going to get bad luck by putting your purse on the floor. I mean, but it ain't safe to put your purse on the floor anyhow. You always want to put it on your lap, because somebody can take your shit and just walk off. All right, but that's what they believe. You could not put your purse on the floor because that was bad luck. You had to take your shoes off because they didn't want no dust, no nothing on the floor. Makes sense about the shoe. If you sweep on somebody's feet, right? If you were sweeping and you swept on somebody's feet, you had to take the broom and you had to spit on the broom. You spit on the broom because that's the sign. That is the sign of bad luck. Sweeping on somebody's feet. So anytime you sweep on somebody's feet, you take the broom and then you go back to doing what you're doing. Now, yes, it is gross and it's disgusting, but that's what they believe. And then also, what my grandma used to do when to keep the holes open in my ears, to keep my ears pierced, she used to take the alcohol and she used to take the straw and put it like through my ears. And when she put it through there, it kept my ears open. So that's one of the practice that they learned in the country. Okay? So those are hoodoo practice. Now, I didn't know anything about it until later on in life. I'm just thinking this is something that my grandmama and her grandma taught her or something. You know, some stuff that was made up. But it's an actual practice. And it's very common with those that's from the rural town, what we call the country. Those are very common practices. But just to give you an example what the hoodoo practice are. Let me go ahead and continue back with the article. All right, so, and it says, during slavery, the words conjure and voodoo were used to describe the conjure practice of enslaved and free blacks. Hoodoo practice documented by former slaves will describe voodoo as either conjure or voodoo. The earliest known use of the word hoodoo to describe African American conjure was around 1870 in a book titled Seaship in the Magnetic Mirror, written by African American occultist Pascal Beverly Randolph. Randolph believed the word hoodoo derived from an African dialect because he traveled to Africa and studied African religions. Today, in the African American community, hoodoo is known by other names such as root work and conjure. All right, so as you can see, it talks about hoodoo practice in St. Louis. So we can just read a little bit of that. And then what I want to do is share some of the Wikipedia source. Okay, so hoodoo in St. Louis. William Wells Brown, circa 1814 and 1884, was a formerly enslaved man and an abolitionist who documented hoodoo practices of enslaved people in St. Louis in two of his books. Brown was born enslaved in Kentucky. In 1827, Brown's enslaver, Dr. John Young moved near St. Louis, Missouri, and established a small farm. Dr. Young hired out Brown to work in the city of St. Louis for steamboat captains and local merchants. During his years enslaved in St. Louis, Brown saw conjuring practices of enslaved people that he documented years later in his autobiographies after he escaped from slavery on the Underground Railroad. In 1849, Brown published narrative of William W. Brown, an American slave, written by himself. In the book, Brown wrote that he saw an enslaved man named Frank, who was a fortune teller. Brown spoke to Frank to know if his plans for escape from slavery on the Underground Railroad would lead to his freedom. Brown wrote, I should have stated that. I should have stated that before leaving St. Louis, I went to an old man named Frank, a slave owned by Mr. Sarpy. This old man was very distinguished, not only among the slave population, but also the whites. As a fortune teller, I found Uncle Frank sitting in the chimney corner about 10 o'clock at night. As soon as I entered, the old man left his seat. I watched his movement as well as I could by the dim light of the fire. He soon lit a lamp and coming up, looked me full in the face, saying, Well, my son, you have come to get uncle to tell your fortune, have you? Yes, said I, but how the old man should know what I came for, I could not tell. However, I paid the fee of 25 cents and he commenced by looking into a gourd filled with water. Whether the old man was a prophet or the son of a prophet, I cannot say, but there is one thing certain. Many of his predictions were verified. I am no believer in soothsaying, yet I am sometimes at a loss to know how Uncle Frank could tell so accurately what would occur in the future. Among the many things he told was one which was enough to pay me for the trouble of hunting him up. It was that I should be free. He further said that in trying to get my liberty, I would meet with many severe trials. I thought to myself, any fool could tell me that. All right, so, and go further down, it says Brown recorded more hoodoo practices in St. Louis in his 1880 book, My Southern Home, or the South and Its People. Brown recalled more events from when he was enslaved in Missouri as a young adult. One night in St. Louis, Brown saw what he called a secret voodoo ceremony among enslaved people. According to Brown's written account, enslaved people gathered secretly at midnight and sat around a quadron speaking in different languages. This can be interpreted as the enslaved were probably speaking in their native African languages, because in his book, Brown wrote that the enslaved were conversing in different tongues. There was a voodoo queen with a magic wand, and a conjuring was placed on the ground, and animal parts such as frog, lizard, snake, dog livers, okay, and beef parts were thrown into the cauldron. During this ritual, Brown recorded that they danced in a circle to where the dance became more frantic, and it seems some of the participants were probably possessed by the African spirit. Although Brown described this ritual as voodoo, it may be a regional style of voodoo/hoodoo in St. Louis. This is an example of how hoodoo in the slave community derived from West and Central African religions. All right. So, a former slave from St. Louis named William Brown, he actually got the chance to study and see what the other slaves were doing. And you see that they were congregating in a circle, right? And they were chanting and speaking in some native African languages. Okay? And he said he sat down with the old man. And the old man told him that you're going to be free. So this old man predicted that, right? That he was going to be free. And that's what ended up happening. Now, again, a lot of us don't always agree when we go to do our reading and stuff like that. Everybody don't believe in that reading stuff, because it may not always be true. again, it's somebody's prediction. You have to see for yourself, right? In reality. But that's just what it was, and that's who he relied on for information. So in my previous video, I spoke about rain showers. Rain shower is a part of the hoodoo practice, right? So rain shower is nothing more than a call and response. So people gather in a circle, they dancing and whatnot, and you got a person that's singing, and as the person is singing or saying a word, then people responding to that individual word or the individual's shouting. So they're literally shouting around and they're singing. So when we look at praise dance, right, in the church, the folks, ooh, 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 hallelujah, ooh, praise the Lord. All right. That's not my singing voice, by the way. But when we see the praise dances and the people clapping and, fellowshipping, that is a form of rain shower. So the next time you go to church, right, and your pastor starts talking all that mess about how they're against the voodoo and they not African descent or their ancestor wasn't African and all that other stuff, just ask them, well, if you're not African, then why you praise dancing? Why you having Holy Ghost? Why you chanting? Why you putting oil on people's head? Why you at the altar? Why you speaking in tongues? Because what they call speaking in tongues, right? We call it gibberish, but that is what the Africans did when they was into a spiritual custom. They spoke in tongues. And also, I want to address this to the atheist community as well. You talk about give up Christianity, this, that, and other. And I agree, you're in your right to not practice any form of Abrahamic religion. You're in your rights. But to criticize people, right, who are into those Abrahamic religion and incorporate African system, you might as well criticize your ancestors because that's what they did. And they passed the tradition on down. Those people are not going to let those traditions die. They're not going to let it die regardless of how you may feel about it. As an atheist person, you don't have to partake in it, but a lot of African customs is in those churches. And they're not going to let it die. They're going to continue to pass that tradition down. So, rule of thumb, just give y'all the rule of thumb. They're not going to let that tradition die. Just like we got brothers and sisters in Islam. They carry on African customs. See, the way that black people practice Islam, and I'm not talking about the Nation of Islam either. I'm talking about those who are in the Orthodox Islam, Sunni Islamic community, okay? The way the black people practice Islam is far different from how those who are from the Middle East practice Islam, okay? I'll just say there is some differences. You can see the differences in the practice. You can see the differences. You can see a little Sufi practice in those black brothers and sisters who are in Sunni Islam. Because those Africans, they were in the the Sufi custom, right? And while they would practice Sufism, they took on their African spiritual system. So you can see that as well if you just sit back and you just pay attention. But anyways, that's this article right here. So let's go on to the next information. Again, you can check this out from National Park Services. I'm gonna make sure I put all the stuff in the description link so I won't forget. All right, so now let's go on to Let's go on here to Wikipedia. So as you can see, it says origins. Let's look at the background. And once again, it says what approximately over 12 million enslaved Africans from various ethnic groups were transported to the Americas from the 16th to 19th century, right? 1514 to 1867 as part of the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade to the United States occurred between 1619 and 1808, and the illegal slave trade in the United States occurred between 1808 and 1860, right? Between 1619 and 1860, approximately 500,000 enslaved Africans were transported to the United States. Ethnic groups brought to the United States during the years of the slave trade were Akan, Iwe, Fon, Fulupe, also known as the Fulani, Igbo, Congo, Mende, and Yoruba, and among many others. After the arrival of diverse African ethnic groups to the United States, Hoodoo was created by enslaved African Americans for their spiritual survival as a form of resistance against slavery. Okay? And it goes on to say, because the African American community did not have the same medical and psychological aids as the European American society, its members were forced to rely on each other for survival. As a result, free and enslaved African Americans relied on Hoodoo for their protection. That was the purpose of having Hoodoo. For what? For spiritual protection. Diverse African ethnic groups from West and Central Africa all worked on the same plantation. And it says these diverse African ethnic group in the United States over time merged into one larger ethnic group called African Americans, who are the creators of Hoodoo. The practice of Hoodoo unified enslaved Africans of diverse origin in America. Despite this ethnic diversity on American plantation, West and Central Africans all brought from Africa their own forms of conjure that developed into the practice known as Hoodoo. What united them was their use of conjure for liberation. For example, the practice of rain shout and Hoodoo unified diverse African ethnic groups on slave plantation. Counterclockwise circle dance was and is practiced in Central and West Africa to communicate with the ancestors and for spirit possession. Enslaved Africans in the United States united under the rain shout, and this unity of diverse Africans in America created an African American identity. All right. So in that time, for the ADOS folks and the damn FBA, I hate bringing y'all names up, but I'm gonna bring y'all up because y'all do this shit every time. It was the diversity of the ethnic groups coming out of Central and West Africa that created what we call today African American culture. Okay? It was full of diversity. So for people who ask, well, what part of Africa are you from? It's 54 countries there. Yes, of course it's 54 countries. But if you study the history, most of the slaves came up out of what? Central West Africa. And some came up out of Southern Africa. But for the most part, Central West Africa. So you are a multi-ethnic group of people. Okay? That's what we consist of. We're not consist of one ethnic background. It's multi-ethnic. All right? Because of the constant people that was brought here. So these Africans, they had no choice but to come together and work together and get used to one another. It was no longer tribalism. It was no, I'm a Igbo or I'm a Yoruba, I'm a Iwe, Fon, all of that. No, they had to come together and put aside their differences because they were working amongst each other, right? They were forced to be on the same plantation. So they had no choice but to bring their traditional practices from what they learned from each of their villages and combine them together to create a new African identity, a new African culture here in America. which we continue to practice to this day. And when people sit here and argue about the origin of hip hop, well, go back and look at the spiritual practices of those African people. When people argue about the origin of R&B, the origin of jazz, blues, folk music, look at the African spiritual custom. It will lead you back to that point. So it becomes nonsensical when people sit here and argue about, well, who started hip hop? Did the Jamaicans start hip hop? Did the Black Americans start hip hop? Everybody pitched in. If you was Black, whether you was Black Caribbean or Black American, whether you're Black Caribbean, Black American, or even Black Puerto Rican or Black Latino, you all pitched in, because New York is a very diverse city. So you have Black people from various backgrounds. All right, but guess what? They had to come. They all lived in the hood. And they created something that fit their identity, that connected them. They gave themselves a cultural identity. They gave themselves a sound. And with these different sounds come from different groups of Black people, right? Combine it together to make what we know today as hip hop. The dance movement, the break dances. When you see the break dances, where you think that break dance come from? That break dance is called capoeira, which was practiced in Brazil, which came up out of West Africa, because those were like war dances, right? Spiritual dances. And they incorporated those into the hip hop culture. So it should not be no debate on who started hip hop if you really know the origin, and if you study the origin where the music come from. You will see it goes back to those African people, because African people are a very musical people. They communicate through using drums, through chants, through dances. Okay? That was the way to give about the liberation. Oh yeah, I'm going live tonight. You done got me hyped. By all means, do that. And I hope that you send me the information. I'll watch the video. By all means. Because we need to know this. We need to learn this. Okay? Now let me go ahead. Let's go down to where it says Botanical Development. Check this out. Botanical Developments. So African American had their own herbal knowledge that was brought from West and Central Africa to the United States. European slave traders selected certain West African ethnic groups for their knowledge of rice cultivation to be used in the United States on slave plantation. The region of Africa these ethnic groups were taken from for rice cultivation was called the Rice Coast, made of what is now Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. These areas were suitable for rice cultivation in Africa because of their moist, semi-tropical environment, and European slave traders selected ethnic groups from these regions and enslaved them in the United States in the Sea Islands, a climatically similar area. During the transatlantic slave trade, a variety of African plants were brought from Africa to the United States for cultivation, including okras, sorghum, yam, benezi, watermelon, black-eyed peas, and cola nuts. And cola nuts is what makes chocolate. Okay? So West African slaves brought not only herbal knowledge with them across the Atlantic, they also imported the actual seeds. Some wore necklace of wild licorice seed as a protective amulet. Captains of slaving vessels used native roots to treat fevers that disseminated their human cargo. The ship's hellish holes were lined with straw that held the seeds of African grasses and other plants that took root in the New World soil. African plants brought from Africa to North America were cultivated by enslaved African Americans for medicinal and spiritual use for the slave community, and cultivated for white American slaveholders for their economic gain. African Americans mixed their knowledge of herbs from Africa with European and regional native African American mixed their knowledge of herbs from Africa with European and regional Native American herbal knowledge. In hoodoo, African Americans use herbs in different ways. For example, when it came to medicinal use of herbs, African Americans learned some medicinal knowledge of herbs from Native American. However, the spiritual use of herbs and the practice of hoodoo, conjuring, remained African in origin, as enslaved African Americans incorporated African religious ritual into the preparation of North American herbs and roots. Spiritual ritual preparation of herbs and roots were important to enslaved people, as they believed combining ceremonies and prayers with medicinal preparation would imbue the medicine with spiritual power and invoke healing spirits that would make the herbal remedies more effective in healing. Enslaved African Americans also used their knowledge of herbs to poison their enslaved. Yep, you heard that right. That's what they did. So this is one of the reasons why I support integrative medicine. Why do I support integrative medicine? Because there is some use and there's some benefactors for herbal medicine, right? There's benefactors to it. But there's also benefactors of using conventional medicine, which is taking insulin, pills, and stuff like that. So they're both are necessary. Both herbal medicine is necessary, and both over the counter and insulin medicine are necessary as well. However, in the very beginning, before you were introduced to taking pills and needles and all of that, your primary medicine, the primary medicine for the body was food. Food is consists of what? Nutrition. Whether it was meat, which is a lot of protein, water, which is mineral, that's part of the food, vegetables, which consist of vitamins, fruits consist of vitamins, and certain meat consists of iron. That was your primary medicine. Because without those food, it will do you no good to take insulin and pills and all of that. Because you got to have food in your body to develop, to be able to naturally heal yourself, right? You got to be able to eat. So for those who think that, well, if you just take over-the-counter medicine and that's it, you're wrong. Over-the-counter medicine and prescribed medication ain't gonna do if you're not eating the proper nutrition. If you're not having food in your body, that's why you got to have plants. You got to have vegetables. You got to have your fruits. You need those things for the body to heal properly. You got to be able to eat properly in order to have a good health, because we got to learn how to balance ourselves, and we have not. That's the thing, we don't know how to do, because of the fact where we come from and how we were brought up. We don't have a lot of healthy grocery stores around us. Okay, so we have to go further out for grocery shopping. But remember, food is your primary medicine. What does the quote say? Let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. That's true. Let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. Okay? So now let's go down to, I want to do two more. All right, let's look at cosmology, right? It says, since the 19th century, there has been Christian influence in hoodoo thought. African American Christian conjurers believe their power to heal, hex, shrink, and divine comes from God. This is particularly evident in relation to God's providence and his role in retributive justice. For example, though there are strong ideas of good versus evil, cursing someone to cause their death might not be considered a malignant act. One petitioner explained it as follows. In Hoodooism, anything the Chu do is the plan of God. Understand, God have something to do with everything you do. If it's good or bad, he got something to do with it. Just wait for you, you'll get it. A translation of this is, in Hoodooism, anything that you do is the plan of God. Understand, God has something to do with everything that you do, whether it's good or bad. He got something to do with it. You'll get what's coming to you. Several African spiritual traditions recognize a genderless supreme being who created the world, was neither good nor evil, and which did not concern itself with the affairs of mankind. Lesser spirits were invoked to gain aid for humanity problem. All right. And so now let's go down to where it says practices. All right, so seeking process. So it says, in a process known as seeking, a hoodoo practitioner will ask for salvation of a person's soul in order for a gullah church to accept them. A spiritual leader will assist in the process, and after believing the follower is ready, they will announce it to the church. A ceremony will commence with much singing and the practice of rain shout. The word shout derived from the West African Muslim word salt, meaning dancing or moving around the Kaaba. The rain shout in black churches originated from African styles of dance. Counterclockwise circle dance is practiced in West and Central Africa to invoke the spirit of the ancestors and for spirit possession. Right? Does this sound familiar? It does. It sounds very familiar. When a person give their life over to Christ, if a person say, I give my life over to Christ, and they become a born again Christian, what the first thing that pastor gonna do? He's going to shout it to the congregation, and the congregation is gonna stand up and clap, and they gonna start singing and chanting, right? And when it comes down to baptism, do you notice that people wear white when they get baptized? That pastor stand in that water and say a prayer, throw his hands up, and then put his hands over somebody's head and throw them in the water and bring them back up. I'm just think about that for a moment. Just think about it. And it says, in the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, area praise houses are a place where African Americans gather to have church and perform healing ritual in the rain shout. The rain shout in hoodoo has its origin in the Congo region of Africa in the Congo cosmogram, right? During the rain shout, African Americans shuffle their feet on the floor and ground without moving their feet from the floor in order to create static electricity from the earth to connect with the spiritual energy of the earth. By connecting With the spiritual energy of the earth, they are also connecting with the spirit of the creator because God created the earth. This is bringing down the spirit. Also, this is done to connect with ancestral spirit. This practice includes singing and clapping. The spiritual energy intensifies till someone is pulled into the center of the rain shower by the spirit that was brought down. This is done to allow spirit to enter and govern the rain. And then what it says, it talks about Voodoo Initiation, pretty much similar to what I was reading, but it says this: the seeking process in Voodoo accompanied with the rain shower is also an initiation into Voodoo. African Americans in the Sea Island, Gullah Geechee people perform initiation of community members by combining West African initiation practices with Christian practices called seeking Jesus. Young people spend time in nature seeking Jesus and receive guidance from the Black religious leaders. The spiritual mothers of the African American community provide prophetic guidance to those seeking. After their initiation, initiates were accepted into the religious Black community. Zora Neale Hurston wrote about her initiation into the Hoodoo in her book Mules and Men, published in 1935. Hurston explained her initiation into Hoodoo, including wrapped snake skins around her body and lying on a couch sofa for the 3 days nude so she could have a vision and acceptance from the spirit. In addition to lying on a couch nude wrapped in snake skins in her initiation, Hurston has had to drink the blood of the Hoodoo doctors who initiated her from a wine glass cup. There are other ways people become a Hoodoo doctor. One is through a mentor under an apprenticeship, and they were born into a family of practitioner. Initiation are not required to become a Hoodoo doctor or root worker. So that was Zora Neale Hurston experience. So she had to wear the snake skin around her body, be naked, and she had to drink the blood of the Hoodoo doctors. Now, me, I ain't drinking nobody's blood. That's off limits. You know what I'm saying? I'm not touching nobody's blood. That's off limits. But that's what she did. Okay? But that part's off limits. All right. So then let's go down to the one that it talk about the bottle tree. I just want to get into that real quick. So a bottle tree. As you can see right here, let's post up that picture. This is a bottle tree. Now, you might wonder, well, what this is, right? Well, let's find out. So, Hoodoo is linked to a popular tradition of bottle trees in the United States. According to Gardner and glass bottle researcher Felder Rushing, the use of bottle trees came to the Old South from Africa with the slave trade. The use of blue bottles is linked to the hint blue spirits. Specifically, glass bottle tree have become a popular garden decoration throughout the South and Southwest. According to academic research, bottle trees originated in the Congo region. The bottle tree practice has been found in the Congo region in Central Africa and in the Caribbean. African descended people in the African diaspora decorated trees with bottles, plates, pieces of broken pots, and other items to drive away evil. This practice was brought to the United States during the transatlantic slave trade. The purpose of the bottle tree is to protect a home or a location from evil spirits by trapping evil spirits inside the bottles. How bottle trees worked was that spirits would be attracted to the sunlight that is seen flickering inside the bottle as the sunlight passes through it, trapping the spirit in the bottle and bashing the spirit with sunlight. Sometimes items such as stones or graveyard dirt is placed inside the bottle to further attract the spirit to the bottle in order to trap it. All right, so that's that information, okay? And you can look that up for Wikipedia if you want to find out more, if you want to learn more about it. But now, there are those of us who don't do bottle trees in the areas, where we live at. So again, that's something that you can find in the country. You won't find that in the city. Yes, we always been spiritual people. Oh, most definitely. We always had that spirit in us. We always had it. Now, there was those who had different belief system. There were those who did not believe in a deity, right? And that adapted to nature. There were those who did believe in some form of God. But either way it go, we always had some form of spirituality. We always had that. I mean, it never died. Okay. So now I wanna share some books real fast. Well, no, I want to share an article that I saw that was very interesting. Okay, so this article here, and I'm not gonna go all the way into it. This one is called Cemetery Hoodoo, Cultural Ritual Crime and Forensic Archaeology. So when I took a glance at this article, I said, this is something I could share, by Sharon K. Moses. So basically, they were doing archaeological research in a southern state, right? And they were, doing forensic archaeology. For those of you that don't know what forensic is dealing with crime. So they were linking the whole hoodoo practice with whatever crime scene was taking place in the area. Okay. But I just want to say this. See, people have the misconception of thinking that those who practice hoodoo are automatically evil people and they just doing evil things. And that's not necessarily true, because we've been fed into the Hollywood concept of evil practice. Oh, those people are just demonic and things like that. Not necessarily. See, anybody can do things with good intention or bad intention. All right. And you don't even have to practice hoodoo or voodoo to do anything evil. You could be in Abrahamic religion and do evil things. You could be an atheist and do evil things. You could be somebody that's in a political and social organization and do evil stuff. It's about the psychology of the individuals and what their intentions are, okay, and what their purpose is for. I mean, just think about it. You got to look at, well, what is the person's purpose? What is their true intentions? How are they going about using it? So we can't say because someone practices hoodoo that they're automatically into evil and demonic things. That's not always the case. That's not necessarily true. I just want to put that out, but let me just go ahead and look at this article. Let's go over it, because it is a very interesting article to me. So the introduction says the objective of this article is to discuss alternative approaches to crime scene investigation and interpretation when unique, non-mainstream religious elements are presented in ethically linked, ritualized crime. This article is not intended, however, to address Satan worship or other so-called anti-Christian network cult activity, which the Federal Bureau of Investigate nationwide and debunked during the Satanist cult craze accusation of the 1980s. So, state accounts of horrific activities of sexual abuse, cannibalism, and human sacrifices by self-identified survivor of cult activity were found to be blatantly fictitious, a strategy for lucrative book sales at the peak of a cult-hungry popular culture industry at the time, a result of widespread social mythology and panic based upon repressed memories. Repressed memory have lost much credibility in forensic world and are often suspected to be a result of leading question and suggestion under hypnosis. All right, so then it talks about today, the majority of homicide and violent crimes associated with cult-like groups, when not linked to issue of mental illness or diminished capacity in some form, have been found to be composed mainly of disenfranchised young men and their followers who justify their violent action with convenient claims of devil worship. In those groups, the power dynamic, sexual manipulation, and exploitation often depend upon using the allure of supernatural claims and fear to bind the group to their leader's agenda and authority, often with the leader gleaming the most benefit, whether through outright profit or the satisfaction of complete control over others. So, all right, to translate it, basically people use the ideas of religion, right? Or use religion or use any type of spiritual system to disguise their true intention. Now, in the 48 Laws of Power, this is called a smoke mirror. That's what's called, smoke screen. So basically, you do things behind the scene, but you use a blueprint as a way to bring distraction to individuals or people to keep others from knowing your true intention. So in this article, I don't think the author is necessarily saying that, that hoodoo itself is evil and it's bad. It's just the individuals that was so-called practicing hoodoo, they were using it as a form to manipulate other people, to gain followers, to bring about cults. And that tends to happen. So people have to be careful whether you get initiated into spiritual systems or going into religious organization. You have to make sure that you are mindful of those individuals who you are encountering, because you don't know what their intentions are. Just like I get some information in my inbox from those who supposed to be Ifa practitioners, Babalawos. They'll come to me and say, hey, if you want to be initiated, if you want to be a part of this, woo, I can do a consultation with you for this amount of money, XYZ. See, this is when I know that, okay, now you run some type of con game over here. You're scamming. I'm good on that. So there are people that will use these systems and religion as a way to build a cult-like organization to get people to follow them and to impose their bad intention and to do evil things to individuals to gain control and power, to bring some form of manipulation. And it happens. It does happen. You have to be careful of that. But let's continue. Let's go ahead and let's get into this article. All right, and then it says, rather, this article focuses on cultural tradition unique to specific population based upon their shared ancestry, history, and social dynamics with a larger dominant society. Furthermore, ritual acts based upon tradition that are defined as criminal activity will produce a crime scene that defies standard investigation methodology because they are not linked to the victims the same way, or the motivation are not immediately obvious. Behavioral evidence at the crime scene may be easily misinterpreted or go unrecognized. There were subtleties in the subject case of this article regarding hoodoo conjure root work that have origins in non-Western folk tradition. All right, so let's go down here. So it says cemetery disturbance and initial responses. So in 2012, cemetery maintenance workers in a region of South Carolina Low Country noticed disturbed earth among rows of graves located at the back boundary opposite the entrance row of the cemetery. Upon closer inspection, they discovered unusual objects scattered over the top and around selected grave sites. By unusual, it is meant that these were not the typical grave site remembrance, such as flowers, keepsakes, and articles of personal significance one expects to find left by loved ones, paying their respects to their deceased. Furthermore, in much to alarm of the maintenance crew. Some of the graves had been partially disinterred as well, where someone had dug down approximately 2 to 2.5 feet, mainly at the foot end of the burial plot. Some of these had been partially reburied, and telltale piles of dirt were still left by the side of the grave that had not been shoveled back into the hole. Jeez. And it says, in the course of restoring and refilling the partial disinterments, workers found jars full of unrecognizable liquid substance deposited at the bottom of the dug out area over the casket. Only in one case did it appear the offenders may have been attempting to reach the casket lid with a narrow burrow that went down nearly 3 feet. However, the burrow stopped abruptly, was empty, and piled in abandonment of the task, possibly out of fear of being discovered. The task becoming too physically demanding for the offender or having run out of time. And then go down to say that cemetery management feared public stigma and loss of confidence in their funerary services, which in turn would result in harm to their business were these incidents to become public knowledge. There were also the concern for the privacy of the families of the deceased and distress it would cause them if the name of their loved ones and their disturbed burials were made public. When efforts by the cemetery's private security failed to catch offenders and the disturbance continued, the cemetery manager elected to contact law enforcement authorities. Police had to contend with lost or destroyed evidence and crime scenes eradicated or rendered unworkable. Some of the maintenance crew had taken pictures before repair efforts were completed, and these were provided to law enforcement and to the author, who also took photographs of subsequent disturbance. Now, anybody knows that when somebody passes away, right, and they're buried, you do not go to the area and dig in the grave and try to pull them out, because that's considered sacred ground. That's considered disrespectful. Once a person passes away and they're buried, you have to let them be. You have to let them be at peace. And that's considered bad luck, to go dig into the graves and putting objects or just trying to get somebody's body out the graveyard like that. That's considered to be disrespectful. Yeah, but it's considered to be disrespectful in African culture. So we know in African culture, once a person is buried, you cannot take them out their gravesite. You cannot go and you can't go dig their body up. Okay? Because once they're buried, that's it. They're at peace. However, archaeologists do this. They have to dig up bodies because they find evidence or clues or whatever. Okay? So it's understandable. But in cultural practices and spiritual practices, once a person dead, that's it. You don't go near them. You don't touch them. Now you can put something down there like a flower. You can pay homage and respect to them, but you don't do anything else. That's it. That's right. That's the meaning of rest in peace. That's right. Rest in peace. Because you let that person be at peace and they go into their final destination, whatever the destination may be. But we know that physically, your body gonna go back to the earth because you're part of the ecosystem, right? Physically. But as far as your soul and your spirit, it goes wherever it transcends somewhere else. So you make a transition, and you have to do it peacefully. All right, let me look at the chat real fast. Yes, it does have a lot of healing into it. And I agree with you. Yes, they do. They use hoodoo for money and sex purposes. Yes. And that's problematic. It's very problematic. Um, Thank you, peace. Thank you, Brandon. All right. So also, this article goes on to say consultation and participation of a forensic archaeologist and anthropologist. In the spring of 2012, the author was approached by local law enforcement about a series of ritualistic activities involving disturbed grave sites in a local cemetery. While the cases analyzed in this article represent only those that occurred at this cemetery, there were incidents of similar activities in other regional cemeteries as well. However, none of those will be covered as these incidents occur outside the jurisdiction of the law enforcement entity with which the author was consulting, and officials in those other jurisdictions did not approach the author for assistance. So it says local law enforcement was familiar with the author primarily through her previous participation and consultation on other forensic matters, but they were also aware of her work as an archaeologist on both North American and international sites, specializing in ritual objects and behavior. By inviting the author's involvement, law enforcement hoped to gain insight through her forensic and crime scene expertise that incorporated historical and cultural understanding for the motives behind the cemetery disturbance. A better understanding would aid in apprehension of offenders and prevention of similar future crimes. For the sake of confidentiality and to protect the privacy of the deceased, their family, and the cemeteries that could be harmed directly or indirectly by identifying specific location, including the identity of the police department in town, that information will be withheld. Suffice to say, this case occurred in the state of South Carolina, and the author provided assistance to law enforcement agencies in several different counties for various crimes, missing persons, suspicious death, and body recoveries among a number of jurisdictions during this time. All right, so let's go further down. All right, so this is the picture of the author, right? And she's holding two spell jar. And it says the analysis of spell jar contents and discussion. Two jars were recovered from cemetery personnel and their sealed contents were delivered to the author for analysis. Officer working the case requested input as to possible motivation and intent behind the behaviors. In absence of a working understanding about these activities, there was concern that besides finding ways to catch or stop the perpetrator, deportation might escalate to involve the human remains. All right, so it says initial examination of the bottles revealed a systematically assembled deposit that appeared to follow a prescribed selection of ingredients and method of handling. It says, I conclude that these were spell bottles or spell jars known among the Gullah in the South Carolina Low Country, Georgia, and beyond. Each jar had wax poured beneath the lid with wax paper on top to create an airtight seal. The lid of the first bottle, a quart-sized ball mason jar, was additionally wrapped with black cloth and tied with black ribbon. The second bottle, a used smuggler jelly or jam jar, had no additional wrapping. Jars previously used for sweet jams or jelly are often associated with relationship spells, and it was in this jar that the target of the spell was a female, based upon the Polaroid photograph found within it. So I'm not going to go any further in this article, but here's the thing: it's just like people just do certain things that bring negative attention. All right, but you can check this article out. It's called Forensic Science International Surgery, Cemetery Hoodoo, Cultural Ritual Crime, and Forensic Archaeology. But yeah, people just do certain things to bring about negative attention. So when you have a certain selected group of people that commit crimes and that bring harm to individuals without purpose, but they just do it just to maintain control and have power over a certain group, then it brings negative, it makes others look bad, right? It makes the institution, the religious organization all together look like they all doing the same thing or they all have the same purpose. And that's not the case. And as I mentioned earlier, before I got to this article, that once a person is dead or deceased, you're not to go over there and to mess with them. For one, it is a crime to go dig up somebody's grave anyhow. That's a crime in itself. You're not supposed to do that anyways. But morally speaking, you shouldn't go mess with nobody's gravesite, period. Morally speaking. Even if it is your enemy. Even if it's your enemy. Once they're dead, they're dead. Let the dead be the dead. It's over with. What else you gonna do? What else can't you do? Once they're deceased, that's it. You can't go do nothing else. You can't go dig nothing. You can't desecrate. You can't disrespect the grave site. Just leave them alone. It's over with. They're gone. All right. Okay, so let me go ahead and give y'all the read materials. I ain't gonna go over it because I've been here. Right, and that's another one. Oh, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Let me talk about that real quick. Dissing the dead. That's another thing. Dissing the dead. You cannot, morally speaking, you should not be going around dissing nobody that's dead. Because they're no longer here to defend their name. They're no longer here to protect themselves. Now, it's one thing if you tell a story about what the person did while they were alive. That's different. But to go around dissing your dead ops and all of that, that's immoral. And that brings about bad character. That brings about bad character. Because that means you have no respect for the family of that individual who passed away. Yeah, that individual might be your enemy or whatever, but for the sake of it, you don't get on the internet or you don't get on social media and talk about or give a description of the crime or discuss how the crime took place and what happened, because that's immoral to speak on. And if you was the person that committed crime, why would you want to go and say anything about it? Anyhow, why would you want to brag about it? Now you have dry snitch. Now you make yourself a target. And that's what we see a lot happening today. These artists, they get on the internet dissing each other dead ops or dead relatives. They talk about each other dead ops in the music and then want to know why people coming for them. You can't be doing that. Because they'll come back on you. Because the relatives are still mourning and grieving for that individual. And then, of course, you got the law enforcement that's going to get involved and they listen to those lyrics. They hear what you're saying. You become that target. You become that prime suspect. Now they got to where, they passing out laws where you can't use lyrics in the courtroom as evidence. Well, the smartest thing to do is not speak on it in your lyrics. Not brag about it. That's the smartest thing to do. Because that way you won't give it a reason for the law enforcement to use it against you. But in some states, they pass the law down. Okay. Yeah, it might protect you from the law. It might protect you from the courthouse, but it don't protect you from those who have intentions to come after you. It may not protect you from your opposition because you spoke on somebody they care about. So it protects you from the law, but it won't protect you from your opposition. It's not guaranteed that it's going to protect you from your opposition. But anyway, I want to give you guys some books that you guys can read into if y'all interested. Hello, my friend Ogunbala. It's been a minute. How you doing? I haven't spoke to you. I haven't seen you. I haven't heard from you in a while. I ain't forgot about you. Just let me know whenever you want me to come on your platform and we can have a conversation. We can have discussion. So, okay, that's cool. That's cool. You guys share that experience with me. You guys tell me. I wish I could get you on here so you could tell me a little bit about your experience. But you probably tied up. So, okay. Well, you know what? As a matter of fact, I can go ahead and bring you on here. I can bring you on here, and you can just share your experience of what was it like for you to be in the low country. So, so if you want to come on here and you want to talk about it, then you can go ahead and do so. Yeah. Yeah, you can share a little bit of your experience, and because I'm talking about hoodoo as a subject, so I'm in a conversation about the history of hoodoo and how it came into existence, and I was just talking about the low country and all that. So yeah, I'll be here. So just whenever you're ready. All right, but anyways, let me share some books with you guys that you guys can read into, look into if you want to if you guys are interested. So these books are dealing with hoodoo. So either they deal with the subject about hoodoo or they deal with the topic that's related to hoodoo. Okay. So the first book is called African American Slave Medicine, Herb and Non-Herbal Treatments by Herbert C. Covey. Okay, so basically this book goes into how African Americans use herbal remedies and non-herbal remedies to bring about survival and healing. Um, yeah, pretty much that's what the book is really dealing with. So it goes into the history about that, how it came from Africa, Central West Africa in particularly, and also it discusses a little bit about hoodoo in this book. So as you can see in chapter 4, it says Conjuring and Hoodoo, right? So it goes into what is conjure. So conjure is a system of belief that was particularly widespread during the early 1800s. It said conjure, voodoo, hoodoo, or root doctrine all have to do with the belief that the behavior of others can be controlled through ritual and manipulation of natural objects. So conjure doctors always address illness at a spiritual level according to Sharrow. Conjure it or its variation is the ritual harnessing of spiritual forces in order to heal, to harm, to predict the future, and to influence individuals or events. Conjurers view illness as either natural or unnatural. They and their patient believe natural illness is controlled by the way one lives, such as coldness, dampness, and diet, and unnatural illness is caused by someone with magical power. They also view illness as the product of conflict between good and evil. All right. I can't do no hoodoo spell. I can't do no hoodoo spell live. I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's possible. I can't do no hoodoo spell. All right. So that's this book here. Again, that's the title of this book, and I'll make sure I put it in the description link. Then the next book, this one is called This book right here is called Mojo Workin. So I don't know if you guys have this book, but it's called Mojo Workin, which is by Katrina Hazzard-Donald. Okay. Now, what's funny when we hear the word, so when we hear the word mojo, right? When we hear the word mojo, we think of something in particular, something deal with the anatomy of the man, right? The male's anatomy. That's what we think when we hear the word mojo. But mojo is actually just dealing with the root work. That's all it is. But when we hear the word mojo, we thinking anatomy. We thinking the man's private part. That's what we're thinking about when we hear mojo, but that's not what the mojo necessarily is. So it's just basically dealing with root work. That's all. So yeah, again, if you got this book, cool. If you don't have it, I suggest you guys to get it. Let's see, what other book? So there's two more. So well, I don't know much about Louisiana. I know that they do a lot of practice of hoodoo and voodoo. Now I don't know how big it was in northern Louisiana, to be honest with you. I don't know how big it was. I never been to Louisiana before, but I do know from people that are from Louisiana, right? And from, just studying some little information about it, that there is a lot of voodoo and hoodoo practice out there. All right, so this next book here is about the hoodoo practice in Memphis, Tennessee. Okay, so this book is called A Secret History of Memphis Hoodoo, Root Workers, Conjurers, and Spiritualists by Tony Kail. Okay, so if you don't have this book, again, I suggest y'all to get this book. I suggest you get this book. Right, but what's funny is they have hoodoo music. So hoodoo music is really consists of people that's in the blues and folk artists. Muddy Water did a song about hoodoo, and then there was another artist, and she was from Memphis, Tennessee. She did a song called The Hoodoo Lady. So there are hoodoo music out there, but it's just basically like blues, folk, and some form of gospel music. What they call Negro spiritual. Yeah, you will find it. So yep. So yeah, that's But yeah, this book is dealing with the history about the hoodoo practice in Memphis, Tennessee. Oh yeah. Then I want to share one more. All right, so this book right here is called Sticks, Stones, Roots, and Bones. Sticks, Stones, and Roots and Bones. Hoodoo, Mojo, and Conjuring with Herbs by Stephanie Roseberg. Okay, so this is another book that I recommend y'all to get. All right. If you guys want to look up more about the stones and the roots and the bones and stuff. What about Hazzard-Donald the Conqueror? You know what? I'm glad that you brought that up. I was reading something about that the other night about John the Conqueror. I'm glad that you brought that up. You know what? While I'm on here, let me go ahead and post that information up real fast because I read something about him. So John the Conqueror, yes, I'm gonna post it up real fast. I'm gonna talk a little bit about it because I read up information on him. So John the Conqueror, right, was considered as a folklore hero in the African American community, which in some shape or form is associated with hoodoo. So, because I was reading about that information just the other day, but let's just go ahead and let's look into it real fast. So, what was the story about John the Conqueror? What was the whole initial purpose? So, John the Conqueror was known as High John the Conqueror. So, John Jack and many other folk variants is a folk hero from African American folklore. He is associated with the roots of Empomia Purga, the John the Conqueror root, or John the Conqueror, to which magical powers are ascribed in American folklore, especially among the hoodoo tradition of folk magic. Muddy Waters mention him as Johnny Cochiro in the song Managed Boy and I'm Your Hoochie Coochie Man. In Managed Boy, the line is, I think I'll go down to old Kansas too. I'm gonna bring back my second cousin, that little Johnny Cockaroo. And I'm Your Hoochie Coochie Man is called John the Conqueror Blue. And it says the folk hero. So sometimes John is an African prince, son of King of Congo, said to have written a giant crow called Old Familiar. He was sold as a slave in the Americas. Despite his enslavement, his spirit was never broken. He survived in folklore as a reluctant folk hero, a sort of trickster figure because of the tricks he played to invade those who played tricks on him. Joe Chandler Harris, Bear Rabbit of the Uncle Rummage stories, is a similar archetype to that of High John the Conqueror, outdoing those who would do him in. Zora Neale Hurston wrote of his adventure in her folklore collection, The Sanctified Church. All right. So it says in one traditional John Conqueror story told by Virginia Hamilton, probably based on Jean the soldier and Ile, the devil's daughter. John falls in love with the devil's daughter. The devil set John a number of impossible tasks. He must clear 60 acres of land in half and then sow it with corn and weep it in the other half a day. The devil's daughter flourishes John with a magical axe and power that gets these impossible tasks done, but warns John that her father, the devil, means to kill him even if he performs them. Said John and the devil's daughter steal the devil's own horses. The devil pursues them, but they escape his clutches by shape shifting. So basically, it sounds like John the Conqueror was a folklore that was able to outsmart his enemy. So he was able to outdo anybody that had intention to do him. Kind of like the Pied Piper story. You know, if anybody know about the Pied Piper, what was the purpose of the Pied Piper? Bring about distraction, right? So that was John the Conqueror. His way was to bring distraction to his enemy. So it's similar to hearing the story about the signified monkey. So what did the signified monkey do? He was a trickster. He knew how to run trick on people, right? He knew how to run trick on other animals. So that was John the Conqueror. He knew how to run tricks. He knew how to get away from his enemies. Oh, okay. But yeah, so yeah, I was reading that the other night, lying, and it was funny that you brought that up. I was reading a little bit about John the Conqueror because I had never heard about that folklore. But yeah, basically he was just somebody who know how to outsmart people. Praise the John Conqueror and Alu Damare. So you're saying Alu Damare and John the Conqueror they had a lot in common with each other? Is that what you're saying? So would you say John the Conqueror was Alu Damare? Because I see based on your comment that you say praise the John Conqueror and Adamare. So that leads me to believe that they must have a lot in common. But you know what? A lot of those African American folklore did come from the concept of those deities in African spirituality. I mean, because that's what I know. When we read about the folklore, right, we can take it back to those African spirituality and those deities and the story about those deities, which is based on the mythology. So there is a lot of commonality. So maybe there is commonality between John the Conqueror and Olodumare, you know, because of the stories and the tales. But except that those names are used to describe. Okay, I'm back. But yeah, I think those those folklores are the nomenclature for the African deities. That's just my opinion. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the folklores, like all of them, but I'm thinking based on how the story is being told and the tales that's being used is pretty much like telling the story of of games. They just use them as folklores to tell a story about it. I'm observing. So maybe I could have it wrong, but that's just what I'm observing. Right there are a couple there. Okay. And Aldumare is in heaven above West Africa. Okay, so see, so maybe I was right. Both of them have a lot in common. So again, so John the Conqueror was a story about Alumare. Oh my goodness, Aludamare. So maybe the story about John was Aludamare that was told in the folklore versus African mythology. So basically, so pretty much I was correct. All right, but thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you. All right, let me go ahead and yeah, let me go ahead and end this live. So I will make sure I'll put the information in the description link, as I said before. So if you guys are interested in find out these books, all right, knowing the name of the books, you guys can look in the description link and y'all can just look it up for yourselves. All right, and I will post the articles up as well. All right. But anyways, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, watching. And shout out to those. That's it. So yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Also, if you guys want to check me out on IG, my IG is Eastside Tip, and also I have a TikTok which is Lightbread89. So if you're on TikTok, follow me on Lightbread89. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I type all this stuff in the wait, I'm gonna type that in the description link as well. I'm gonna type all of that too. So yeah, I'll be sure to do that. But anyways, y'all take it easy. Y'all be safe, and I will come back next time, and I will do a subject about Reverend Wyatt T. Walker. So I'll be sure to do a subject on him, Reverend Wyatt T. Walker. Okay, he was an African American pastor that was from Boston, Massachusetts, but he had a church in Virginia, and he was also a civil rights activist. He was marching alongside with Dr. Martin Luther King, and he goes into the history about gospel music, um, just dealing with African tradition. I mean, he was very African centered. So, I'll come back on our elevation. Thanks to the chat once again. I appreciate y'all so much, and that's it. All right.